academic institution was part of the project. And overall, the sectors that were looked at was the food processing and packaging, metals processing and chemicals use in production. And these sectors were looked at in different countries for the implementation of the pilot project. Project objective was to create conditions for service providers to support SMEs, and these service providers basically refers to the cleaner production centers and other service providers that we work with to support the SMEs to improve sustainability performance through eco-innovation. So just to give you an idea of what the project implementation entailed, there were quite a few countries involved. 8 countries from 3 regions got involved. The overall coordination was done by UNEP. The NCPC South Africa was one of the national implementation partners with Stellenbosch University. And the whole idea was to have 5 companies from each country going through a process or through the implementation methodology for eco-innovation that was developed by UNEP and by the Danish Technical University. And of course, that was captured in the Eco-Innovation Manual that's freely available on UNEP's website. That you can look at, and is currently in the process of being updated subsequent to the pilot project. So, as I mentioned earlier, there was a call for proposals to participate. In South Africa's case, we looked particularly at the technical implementation within the metal sector. The other countries includes Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Uganda, Kenya, Egypt, Colombia, and Peru. Peru was the other country that looked at metals and also at chemicals. But on the African continent, the only country that looked or that included the policy component on eco-innovation was Kenya. And they did a very extensive policy mainstreaming exercise on eco-innovation. Yes, on our side, I think there's always this notion that our policies are well developed, especially if you look at our innovation policies, environmental policies, and it's covered. I think the concept is the notion that eco-innovation is covered through the existing policies. But these were the projects, the pilot projects. I think one of the things that came up that we, of course, asked quite right at the beginning was why did we not look at agri-food in South Africa as a sector? But unfortunately, the sectors were quite limited, and we were looking at metals, the metal sector. So I hope this is clear enough. This is really just a summary of all of the steps within the approach of that was developed by Eco-Innovation and the Danish Technical developed by UNEP and the Danish Technical University. And the idea of this 6-step process was really to make sure that there is a very good preparation stage. And this preparation stage specifically looked at identifying suitable companies to participate in the project, and that will be eligible and will have the capacity as well as the appetite to adopt eco-innovative business strategies and business models. We went through quite an extensive process to screen companies, to evaluate their ability to be eco-innovative, to get them or to get a sense of just how open they are to new ideas and business model adoption. Once we did that, particularly through or specifically through some of the sector associations in the metal sector in the Western Cape. Once we did that, we then went through a process of identifying about 10 companies to develop strategies with them on eco-innovation. And that process included a in-depth assessment conducting firstly a preliminary assessment and an in-depth assessment looking at existing business strategies and plans, existing business models, and then doing a life cycle thinking exercise on the sustainability hotspots within those business models, and then coming up with a new business models or setting a strategy, eco-innovator strategy that would address those sustainability hotspots that were identified along the value chain and how it contributes to the value chain pressures the company experienced, developing new business models, um, workshopping that with the business, all the important role players within the business, and then getting that adopted or accepted by the management of the companies. Following that, building a roadmap was really just to look at um, measuring, or not really measuring, but analyzing the risk factors of each of those business models, and then getting the company to implement that. So the implementation process currently for the project that we worked on is in progress. Not all of the companies really found the new business models as appealing as the existing business models, and found uh, the requirements of those business models too risky. But some of them were implemented, and there's currently one company that is implementing a business model that was developed through the process. And we hope to review the impact that they've achieved in due course. So just to go over the timeline of the project, it started in 2015 and we ended earlier this year with a final workshop that Cheryl referred to earlier. Um, but ultimately, to give you an idea of who we worked with, Stellenbosch University, the South African Sustainable Stainless Steel Association, the Western Cape Tooling Initiative, and of course with UNEP being the technical support to make sure that everything we worked on was up to par and consistent with what was happening in the other countries. We had a small team consisting of myself, two consultants that worked with the NCPC who attended the training, as well as Peter van Heineken from University of Stellenbosch. We started off doing an industry workshop, a kickoff workshop, and we went into the market analysis specifically on metals fabrication and tooling in the Western Cape. That gave us quite a good insight in terms of opportunities for these businesses that we've identified to extend into new markets or to produce products into different markets. And we ended off with selecting 5 companies to participate on the project, and to support them with this whole process of implementing eco-innovation. Just to give an idea of what we found, I think one of the key messages that we got from the participants right at the beginning is that the process was very complicated. They found it quite complicated. One of the areas that they found quite challenging was the life cycle thinking approach. It's something that in SMEs is quite new, and understanding the life cycle of their products and processes was really not a priority. And in this particular instance, dealing with metals fabrication and tooling, a lot of the companies were component manufacturers and looked at themselves as really just producing and manufacturing to specifications given by someone else. So they didn't really see any opportunity for either changing or adopting or redesigning, because they were quite dependent on the clients. There was quite a few companies who raised access to incentives early on. One of the few things, one of the key things that were mentioned is that for us to really consider any type of change in our business, we need to be supported financially to take that risk. The implementing theory was received quite with quite a lot of skepticism. A lot of the companies felt that just investing their time and human resources into a new business model can really be risky for them, and in the current climate, economic climate, they found it quite difficult to justify doing that. Um, we found that a lot of companies had a didn't really have a strong sense of growth prospects. I think that was one of the points that I didn't list here, but one of the key things that we picked up is that a lot of the companies that we worked with didn't really think of growth. The mindsets were really on just staying, keeping the doors open, just surviving, surviving this economic climate. And even when we spoke to companies about the opportunities in other African countries, adopting and adapting their products, maybe to go into a market in other countries on the continent, a lot of them felt that, for us to do that, we need to first service our existing clients, and before we can even think. So growth prospects was really low, and with that, a lot of companies felt that it's maybe not that easy for them to start changing their business models. Just out of the sector market analysis, like I mentioned, a lot of component manufacturing. The commodity prices within the sector was also a big concern for most of the companies. Labor unrest, of course, in the metal sector is very common in South Africa, and a lot of the companies felt that the labor unrest, as well as a lack of skilled labor in some of the companies, was an area that first need to be worked on, and that might require dependence when you look at new business models. Of course, low margins is one of the reasons why some of them felt they don't want to take the risk. Um, I think out of everything, we did realize that there was a lot of benefits to the project, a lot of benefits to the approach. The Okay, here's some of the other challenges that I spoke about just before, but maybe just look at the benefits. A lot of the companies shared with us after going through the process what they felt could be beneficial of the approach. Um, some of the companies, one of the companies that's doing quite well, indicated that this approach really supported their growth strategy for the next 10 years, although they haven't really started putting it in place. Um, there was a feeling that from some of the companies, that this approach, if applied at the right time with the right support and the right financial mechanisms, can definitely help them to attract investment and create partnerships in other countries. And there was definitely a feeling that they can improve profitability. But again, it was mainly linked to financial support, partnerships, reducing the risk, and not radically changing business models, but phasing it in a manner that does not disrupt existing capacity and operations. Of course, this whole approach is based on driving SDG 12, that focuses on responsible consumption production. This is just idea, just to give you a sense of what we experienced, and having engaged with a sector. It's quite a small sector and a subsector of a bigger sector, but testing this approach, and specifically within the manufacturing industry, sharing with them this practical way of adopting an approach through applying a business model view. This is the feedback, a lot of the feedback and experiences that we got from it. And Yeah, there's been quite a good response when we had quite a good response when we did our national workshop in June earlier this year. And a lot of the calls from the participants was, how can we take this model, how can we take this approach and replicate it, and specifically looking at sectors that's quite critical to the South African economy. So that was a good suggestion. I think another suggestion was, how can we take this practical approach? How can we share this with incubators or with sector bodies that support SMEs, And that was another good suggestion. And I think from a research perspective, um, as Cheryl mentioned earlier, there's quite a keen interest on doing more research within industry on the trends, what's happening, how are companies thinking about eco-innovation, are there eco-innovative cases that we might not have seen in different sectors, and what can we learn from them, what can we share with other companies to show that this can work. It might just not have been called eco-innovation, but they're probably doing it already, and to really support the uptake of this concept. So thank you very much. That's all from my side.